All right. Greetings, everyone. Stephen Donaco here. I'm the founder of Social Chrysalis, and it is my pleasure to have two of our faculty members doing this roundtable tonight. Marti Spiegelman and Robert Novak are doing our theme, What is Consciousness? So a really big subject that is going to, I'm sure, fill 60 to 90 minutes very quickly. So I won't spend a whole lot of time with introductions, but just wanted to say hi to everyone and really deeply appreciate your presence here. We are definitely at the tipping point, the great turning, whatever you'd like to call it. There's so much happening in the world, and there's just so much topsy-turvy and upside downness, and we're being shaken and stirred, and stirred to really show up is what Social Chrysalis is all about. It's really the purpose of the platform. We're an educational platform teaching the skills of conscious evolution and inviting people to take action towards that. So we are very focused on what it takes to show up and preparing people for just that. So Marti and Robert's presentation and talk tonight will be very focused on the application of consciousness to that, as well as inviting you to participate. So they're obviously here to present, but they're also here to invite you in as well. So with that, I won't take up any more time, and I'll just hand it over to Marti and Robert. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here, and thank you, Marti and Robert, for facilitating tonight. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome, Stephen, and so grateful for Stephen and how our meeting came about to be part of Social Chrysalis. Definitely, very, very happy to be part of it. So, tonight at this roundtable, we're going to, share and discuss, and we want you to interact, right? Chat, raise your hand so we can, talk about things. We're going to try to get out of here within that 90-minute time frame so everyone can get on with their lives. But the live interaction and discussion is real key. And I know when I get, going, I'll be, flying with, whatever needs to be said. And that's, real key as well, that, I'll hopefully take a breather once you guys have the option to, interact with us. But anyways, in saying that, I turn it over to Marti. Marti's the founder of Precision Consciousness. So Marti, take it away. Thank you so much.
Hey, thank you, Robert, and thank you, Stephen, very much. It's great to have everybody here tonight. And, consciousness, well, what a big topic. What are we doing trying to talk about consciousness? It's hard to hold it in your hands, isn't it? Because it's not an idea, and it's not an instruction, and it's not a strategy, and you can't think your way there. Consciousness is a state of being. And I want everybody to pay attention to language tonight, because language is an outcome of consciousness. So we're going to use an outcome of the thing we're talking about to try to talk about it. So try to feel everything that Robert and I say. Try to feel it in your bellies rather than think about it. And I think if you feel your way with us, then we'll have bigger insights and maybe more understanding. And I'm thinking of something that a colleague of mine, well, one of our faculty member, Mike Parker, who's in the UK, he said something to me a few weeks ago that this business of trying to talk about something like consciousness, imagine you've got a block of wood, or maybe you're a sculptor, you've got a big block of marble, and I actually like the wood better because you can follow the grain of the wood with your chisel as you're carving it out, and it's the grain that you reveal that is the language that describes the wood. And that's kind of what we're trying to do tonight, is we're trying to follow the grain, the feel of what consciousness could be, and the language is going to come from that feeling experience. So I like to think about consciousness, first of all, at a universal scale, because basically, we talk about, oh, everything's conscious, it's a conscious universe, and we throw these phrases around. Well, let's feel that for a minute. The universe is, quote unquote, conscious, and all indigenous cultures talk about some kind of intelligence. The way Max Planck, who is a physicist, he used to talk about that intelligence as the intelligence that moves the forces that keep all the electrons in their orbits here in our world. And if you can think of that intelligence, feel that big flow, that big intelligence moving energy and information, think of that as consciousness. It's a really good image for modern people. And indigenous people have called that consciousness. They've called it Wankantanka. They've called it Wirakochantiksiktapak. They've called it Allah, Yahweh. We've got all kinds of names. And some cultures say there isn't a name because it just is, right? So let's come now. I like physics for modern people understanding consciousness. So let's come to physics for a minute. If you talk to the astrophysicists, they call themselves cosmometrists. They study the cosmos. They will tell you that consciousness is a flow of energy and information in the universe. And that flow essentially creates everything, from galaxies to planets to people to hedgehogs to whatever. And if you can imagine a stream flowing, let's take it at another scale because consciousness works at all scales. Imagine a stream flowing at your feet and you're watching this little flow. Watch the water, and that water flowing, every now and then, it creates a little whirlpool, right? This is just what the flow, the physics of flow does. It flows along, and every now and then it gathers in a little whirlpool, and then it gathers in another one. Well, imagine that little whirlpool is Earth, or you, right, or our galaxy. The big flow that we just talked about is doing exactly the same thing as the stream. And those flows, when they gather in the little whirlpool, if we're physicists, we would start to call that a torus. It takes a certain mathematical shape, and in that torus shape, energy flows from the big flow through the whirlpool shape and back out into the universe. And this is happening at all scales simultaneously. So I want you to feel that image in your bellies. And now let's come to a human being, human consciousness. We're just another scale of that big flow, making little whirlpools that turn out to be three-dimensional energetic systems, right? That's a conscious human being. Now, for humans, we have this really unique apparatus. We have this very unique brain, and the brain and our sensing systems, and quite frankly, our energy body, if you're into energy bodies already, the way we're put together, we have a very particular way of engaging that flow of energy and information. It's very sophisticated, but let's keep it as simple as we can. The Yaquis in central Mexico, really incredible indigenous tradition, and these are people who understood human consciousness and human nature really deeply. They say that the core of our being human is the act of perception, and the magic of our being human is the act of awareness. So these two things, perception and awareness, are two of what I call the four cornerstones of human consciousness. Now, perception is really interesting because, in English we take a word and over a few decades or centuries we flip the meaning. And now we will talk about, well, that's my perception or that's your perception. Now we talk about perception as something a little subjective. But originally, if you go back to the Greek and Latin roots of the word, to perceive means to know the environment through the senses, the five senses. It means to collect pure data from the world around you. It means to know the moisture in the air, this exact speed of the wind, the temperature, the color, the shape, the texture, the energies between things. We are masters at picking up pure perceptual data. And it's not distorted, it's the pure data, right? So that's the core of who we are. We're perceiving that all the time. And that data comes into, I'm going to simplify this, so if there are any physiologists or neurophysiologists in the audience, just bear with me. So imagine that data comes into your brain, which is where it eventually ends up. Most of your brain is really skilled at receiving that data, tagging it, storing it, cross-referencing it, pulling it up, mixing it and matching it, and creating stuff, right? Most of your brain does that. It doesn't use language, it creates language. It doesn't use logic, it might create logic. Most of the time it's creating, and we call that the imagination. So that's an aspect of human consciousness, is that capacity to perceive and create. Now the problem is, or the challenge is, remember that thing called awareness? That's one of the cornerstones of human consciousness. How we're using awareness is everything, because most people on the planet today are not using their awareness in a way where they know what they're perceiving. Yeah. So human consciousness, if we're going to be fully conscious and not partially conscious, if we're going to know the world totally, know opportunity totally, understand where to create and what can be created, we have to have some kind of handshake between our skill with awareness and our skill with perception, right? So this is a big it's a big challenge with, especially with modern consciousness. So this is where a lot of my work lies, is in this arena of training awareness. And if we are using awareness in a limited way, then that will limits everything. It limits how we know ourselves. It limits our ability to show up in the world. It limits our understanding of our gift and our expression of our gift. It limits how healthy we are. It limits how we love, right? It limits how we relate, whether we're collective or isolated in individuation, right? So how we use awareness is really everything. And the big topic of consciousness, if we remember just a couple of minutes ago, we've come a long way, huh? Just a couple of minutes ago, we said consciousness is this flow of energy and information. And for humans, I want to be aware of the flow because I'm built and you're built in this incredibly skillful, masterful way that you can use everything that is flowing. All that energy and information will flow into you, and you will create something unique with it if you're fully conscious. The next person will take the same flow and create something else completely unique because if they're fully conscious, because the human design is such that each and every one of us is a unique expression of the big consciousness. And our job is to keep expressing. Our job is to keep expressing. They say in the Andean traditions that for a human being, first we have to be healthy, right? So they say that a healed state is based on our connectivity to the world. Well, let's go back to this big flow of energy and information. If I'm open to the world, that flow will come through me and back out of me, and I will be connected to the world. Right? So I will be in a healed state. My energy will be flowing in an optimal way. And maybe some of you with us tonight are healers and you know about energy flow in the body. Well, it's not just confined to the body. It has to do with how we're connected to the world. So this is an expression of full consciousness. So if I'm healed, I'm connected. And if I'm connected, I'll be able to stay healthy. Now the other thing is that's required for us is a state of fulfillment. Well, in the Andean traditions, they say that fulfillment is the outcome of expression. So if I've got a gift, it needs expressing. And to express it, I need those connectivities. So part of our being conscious as humans in particular is to connect and then to express, right? And then you look at our culture, we have honored individuation. Have we not? Right? So everybody's individuated, and we're very uncertain about how to connect. And that means that what we could express, what we could create, the way we could solve problems, it's tenuous right now. And in a COVID-19 world, boy, we do not need to be tenuous. We need to be bold. We need to be brave. We need to be out there taking quantum leaps, right, Robert? Yeah. So consciousness is important. Everybody's consciousness matters. How you use awareness matters, and what you perceive and what you do with it, it matters. So this is not an esoteric topic. It comes right down to the runway level, how we're taking care of ourselves, how we're loving, how we're connecting, how we know the world, and how we're seeking opportunity. These are all matters of consciousness and how our consciousness is, how open it is. Yeah. So I'm going to pause there for a minute. Robert, does that spark any big things for you?
Well, Marti, there's no question that I love how you brought in perception and awareness, right? Because when I look at defining consciousness, to me, it's the fundamental essence of all that is. And it's all about us increasing our awareness of that consciousness, the fundamental essence of all that is, right? So, and the perception of it is right on, right? And what are we doing to make ourselves more perceptive? And that's not make yourself more mental or intellectual. There's a whole other aspect of, using your whole multidimensional aspects of your body perceptions, right? And having the awareness that you are aware, right? Because a lot of times that gets shut down in many ways, and we don't want to recognize it, but we need to recognize what's going on, right? I mean, because when we're young, with our young, or even with our times, many times, oh, that's not happening. But, like I said, with my children, if they ever perceive something that me or the mom were doing, I'm gonna say, I need to be honest, because they're picking that up, right? I don't want to shut that down. So our perception and awareness is wonderful. I'm glad you brought that in. And I love the fact that you said our job is to keep expressing.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
love that.
Great.
Yes.
Yeah, it's, the training in awareness is something, it's where my work begins when people come to work with me. It's what human beings used to do for their children. Life would begin with awareness. Children would be taught what nature was. They would be taught how to feel energy. They would be taught the songs of all the birds and the whispers of all the trees, right? They would be taught the scent of the earth where they lived. They would be taught the stars in the sky. All of these connectivities comes through our perceptual skill, that precise capacity to pick up sensory data and then use it. And our human perception is very, very accurate. There's an analogy I like to use, because I used to do a lot of cycling. So I think of bike shops, right? And when I would take my road bike in to get the wheels trued, the bike mechanic would put the bike up on a stand, and he had a little machine with lasers, and he'd beam the lasers, and he'd get the wheel true. But that was only 4/5 of the job. Then he would put the machine aside, and he would use his eyes, because the human eye is way more accurate than that laser beam, way. And that's just one little example. I mean, we are taking in sensory data from all the time, 24/7. You can't really stop it. And we're taking in sensory data from our environment through about a radius of 5 miles. And this has been studied, especially in people who are having waking brain surgery. Sometimes the surgeons will poke around, they'll ask the person to speak, and the person who's being operated on will say, oh yeah, I remember from like 35 years ago I was camping with my dad, and there was this like a herd of deer through the forest on the other side. They would describe all these things that were recorded in the brain. Yep. And the only thing we're missing is those recall pathways. And to create the recall pathways in our brain, you have to train awareness. You have to bring awareness to something. And there's a kind of meta-awareness where I think you just touched on that, we're aware of being aware. This is one of the magical things about being human. And this is using our connection to the world to call in that data, to use that data to connect again, to express again. And it has nothing to do with the ego. One of our big jobs is to get awareness off the ego. It's kind of where modern people have landed. And so now it's a big job to train awareness. And it's an active job. It's like on your feet and on the move. It's not, I always get in trouble because I say this thing about meditation. Training your awareness is not the same as meditating. That's a different practice or different purposes. And so you have to really get up and get out in the world. And it does take a while if you're an adult starting, but it's missing from our culture, and I think it's a big part of regaining our consciousness.
Agreed. So you're saying that Googling is not increasing your awareness? Is that what you're saying?
It's increasing Google. I mean, I love that because it literally is increasing Google, because every time we Google, it's increasing interconnectivities in the Google network. Yeah? But if we use awareness to notice something in the world around us and then notice it again in a different way, then we get this thing called neuronal feedback, and it comes back into our brains. It's like Googling our own brains. And we can literally wire our brains, not just through the cortex, but deep in where our deep memory lives. And yeah, you got to work at it. Yeah, so don't wire Google, wire yourself. I love it.
Absolutely. And this is why, you mentioned meditation, and why I call, the practice I take people through is connection practices, because you have to develop that awareness of those sensitivities, right? It's an experiential thing. And so it's really, important the way you share it in there, because it's right on.
Yeah, yeah. And, there are examples that I use for my students. Let me call up a couple of these things. I mentioned that in the modern world, people tend to have a very limited way of using their awareness. And we have, in the human brain, we have a very beautiful gift. It's a recent evolutionary gift. And it comprises about 2 tablespoons of our brain. So it's like 2% of 3 pounds, 0.96 ounces. That's about it. And in that 2%, it's mostly located in your left temporal lobe, sort of the left side over here. In that 2%, you have the areas that control speech, so we can recite poems and sing arias and all that beautiful stuff. You have the language centers, but you also have a capacity of the human brain to process things in a linear fashion. In other words, to follow a linear map, to go from A to B to C and back again. And you think about humans as we developed, we started in a few little spots on the planet, and we went everywhere. There aren't very many mammals that did that, right? And we traveled on foot. And if you are into the very, very early cultures in Mongolia, we even learned to teletransport. I mean, we're astounding. And we sort of took over the world. So we have to have a part of our brains that can take one map for one set of actions and follow it, so we don't get distracted or lost or eaten or anything before we get home again, right? The rest of our brains holds all the rest of the data. So we have this, I call it the linear mind sometimes. And with my students, we nickname it the 2%, because it's a tiny part, but it's important, right? But what's also in there is the ego structure and its direct wiring to the limbic system, especially the limbic fear circuit. And modern people with this sort of insistence on individuation, pull yourself up by your own bootstraps, be out there, be yourself, all that stuff, we've forgotten how to connect.
Yep.
Which means, for one thing, that expression is really tough. If you don't have those outward connections, how are you going to express? But we have so honored and put on a pedestal this business of individuation that our awareness has gotten stuck in this tiny little linear part of our brains. So we become very self-referential, which is not fully conscious at all. We're not really aware of the world. And in that part of the brain, it's wired in a special way. It's wired to go from A to B to C. It's wired to choose A or A prime, not both, right? Because it's following a map created by our genius 98%, by our great imagination. And if the map doesn't work, it's supposed to send it back, right? But if you're stuck in this linear part, you probably have forgotten how to send the map back, so you struggle with it. And life becomes, if this, then that, am I there yet? And I can only choose A or A prime. So it's my idea, not yours, my culture, not yours. Am I there yet? Oh God, I'm not there yet. And the limbic system and my inner critic and all my stuff in there that's supposed to be discerning for me, it starts to become kind of a jury, a judge and jury in my own brain. And this is really, it's an epidemic. We have another epidemic on our hands. But it can be solved if people are willing to train their awareness, if people are willing to work in nature, to do something that doesn't have a direct outcome. It's like these 2 parallel tracks. And on one track, you're in nature, hopefully with a really good teacher or mentor, learning how to use your awareness, learning to experience the world. And that's it. There isn't any goal. There isn't any test. There's just learn to have an experience. And the parallel track is your life, and all of a sudden your life changes. All of a sudden, consciousness inside you opens. Yeah.
No, exactly. And, you know, we forget about that nature can do that for us. One, we're touching something different, right? Experiencing something different. But you do have to use that consciousness of connecting with it different in order to make that change in you, right? It just can't be, you know, nonchalant, okay, I'm going to do this and everything's just going to be fine. And, you know, where I'm going to take it here in a bit is, you know, on a whole different multi-dimensional basis through the DNA and everything else, which can be a lot of fun. But we have to, you know, to increase our awareness, we have to be aware of how we're connecting to have the experience that make the change.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Oh, and I love that you just mentioned the other dimensions, because one thing that happens when you really get your awareness off yourself and you start to live in awareness of the world, connecting to the world, sensing first, not thinking, what happens with enough practice and enough focus is your awareness begins to pop to a level. Sometimes people call it transcendent. Jung called it the transcendent level. But it pops to a level where you have awareness of the wisdom of the species. You have awareness sometimes people experience that at a cellular level. You'll suddenly know something about yourself and your life and your power that nobody ever told you, but you know it and you feel it literally in your body, or you feel it at a level that you can't connect to a personalized version of yourself. And this is another thing that human awareness is capable of, is tapping into this dimension of consciousness, is how we usually say it. It's like a slipstream of wisdom that is available right here, right now, but you have to free your awareness up to get it. You have to release yourself to the world and to life to get there.
Absolutely. I mean, we are, you know, all answers are out there. You just have to open the awareness to get them.
Yeah, exactly. And I think right there, that's really tough, because most people are so self-referential that in spite of themselves, they try to think their way there. They try to, quote unquote, solve the problem. And a lot of what happens in just the beginning training of awareness is that you realize the difference between thinking and sensing. And that sounds a little silly to hear it, but when you go out and start doing these sensing exercises, you realize, oh my God, I was actually thinking that. I didn't actually experience it through my senses. So this big teasing apart of awareness off the personal self, awareness off the ego and into the world, that's a big job. It's a big job. But once you do that, everything else, it's like you said, everything else is there. It opens up. There isn't any trying to do anymore. There isn't any doing. It becomes part of your world, right? Yeah, it's like we know that most of us have 2 arms and 2 legs, right? We don't have to think about that. We don't have to recreate that every day. So we become people who know the world in these other dimensions, and it's quite beautiful.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you, Marty. I'm going to go ahead and ramble on from here, and then I'll ask you to chime in.
You bet.
All right. So, you know, for me, when we look at, you know, conscious, like I said, to me, it's the fundamental essence of all that is, right? And to me, the real key is, you know, connecting and knowing that you are a sacred and divine being. And this is something that it's beyond just, you know, stating it. It's really knowing it, right? So we start living in that multidimensional realities when we can actually say, wow, I am sacred and divine. And you do open up that awareness to so many other things, right? Now, I understand the difficulties, if you want to say, living in this Roman numeral time matrix that we live in, because it is a conditioned aspect, right? But increasing our awareness of all what we've just been talking about is real key. And, you know, one of the things I was going to talk about tonight was unraveling, if you want to say, conscious, or at least giving you some pointers. But first I want to go into the DNA, because I think it's extremely important that we understand what we have, you know, right here with us. So I'm going to go into, well, let's say this. We're all familiar, if you want to say, with the common depiction of DNA, right? The chemistry model, the double helix, that, the base pairs, pair and twist, right? And it's just like spiraling ladder. Well, we also hear the term of DNA strand. However, it's actually more of a loop. So a composite in DNA is, composed seemingly of the spiraling ladder on top of a spiraling ladder, weaved in, to another wraparound spiraling ladder. And so it actually forms this loop. But it's also should be noted that this double helix nature is also a counteropposed spiral that's going. So it's a simultaneous spiral going in both directions at the same time. Now, what's important about this is that in electricity, it's called inductance, where, in a magnetic field wraps around another magnetic field, right? Now, what's important about that is this inductance, this way it's doing it, is actually amplifies voltage then, and it allows for communication without wires. Well, that's the importance then of our DNA that's, with the loop shape, and also with the spiraling design where things are wrapped together and counter-opposing, because it makes then, it makes things possible as far as this communication without chemicals racing between, without electrical synapses connecting the cells together. It's happening, it's singing in harmony, if you want to say, right? So the other important thing to know is that the DNA that's in your big toe is the same as the DNA in your brain. So and the important thing to know is every DNA molecule knows the plan of who you are. And, so when we look at this inductance, right, that, between the DNA loops in each cell, each, loop of the DNA has a magnetic field, and it loops to this, one cell and the other cell next to each other. So we have these trillions of overlapping magnetic fields of the DNA, in the cell, and it equals one single consciousness, okay? So this then leaves this magnetic imprint that we can call our signature frequency. So, there's, a lot of, research done in Russia with some different Russian scientists, and, they definitely say our body is a biocomputer, and I know definitely that's how I look at it too, and it's definitely even more than that in many ways, but it's at least that, right? Well, if we go and look at this research beyond the chemical biased, approach, these Russian scientists, they definitely stated that there was an unexplainable consciousnness or energetic intelligence about our DNA, right? Just like Marti mentioned about the atoms, all connected and somehow, it just all works, right? There's just this consciousness. And so they definitely, said that DNA has a multi-dimensional field around it, and that the DNA is susceptible to receiving information from outside sources, right, when it gave it instructions. So they proved that the nature of reality is well beyond what meets the eye, okay? And that's why, we need to increase our awareness, right, our sense, senses that, Marti's talking about also, to really get a full understanding out of the limited view of what we're trained and taught in, right? So we have to get past what's met the eye or our trainings that we're kind of, conditioned in. So only 10% of our DNA then is used for building proteins. Now, these are the gene-producing DNA, the chemistry codes of the DNA. And hear this, they are simply slaves to the 90% of the DNA that is doing the talking or the communicating, right? So this 90% was originally labeled junk, okay? But it's also what makes it so unique, what makes it so multidimensional, right? And so this is very important, that the 90% is not needed for protein synthesis, but it's actually used for communication beyond even this physical body, okay? In fact, the DNA is a crossroads between God creator and man, from the mixture of quantum and non-quantum, right? So you can say that 90% of the DNA is a reflection of your spirituality, right? Your connectedness, your awareness. So it's also, been shown that DNA has like this mini portal, okay, that leads to a multi-dimensional universe. And this mini portal within the DNA is the key for it connects human beings to all that is and never was. Okay, so what's important here that also there's this other study where the DNA changes form based on the feelings emitted by each of the researchers, right? So in this example, the researchers were, felt like approval, right? Love, and even, drunkenness. And they noticed then that the DNA responded in relaxation. What that meant is that they opened up more, it lengthened, right? So this loop, and it lengthened. Well, they also know that the opposite was true when there was frustration and anxiety, anger, and stress. The DNA strands became shorter, okay? They shut off its codes. In other words, the DNA reacted to negative feelings, right? And shut things down. So that then shuts us to our quantum multidimensionality, right? And it even diminishes our light and our energetic resources. What I mean by that is that, research definitely has shown that, living in a state of stress or survival mode, it depletes our energetic fields. It pulls it in, makes your body more chemistry, more dense, right? So it's really important then that we note that DNA responds to human consciousness. It responds to us waiting to communicate with it. In fact, it responds to all of our different communications, right? But it's also going to then respond to any higher frequency communication from others, or even higher intelligent resources, right? To help, bring it, to enlighten us, if you want to say. So our spiritual consciousness practices that we're doing, whether they be, more practical or, more cosmic, more, broadened, is all important versus just saying, hey, I'm just staying in this limited aspect of the view, right? So it's important then to note that our non-quantum DNA, this chemical aspect of the DNA, it doesn't initiate any action on its own accord. It's reactive, not proactive, okay? But we know that the chemical-based DNA will change based on its environmental experiences. I'm sure you've heard of Bruce Lipton, Joe Dispenza. They talk about the environment affects our genetic makeup. So our non-quantum DNA is not reactive. I mean, it's not proactive, it's reactive, right? So this means, through research, they know that the DNA responds to inaudible and audible sounds. So that means even our own voice, right? So it's been proven scientifically where language frequencies, our own words or sounds itself, were successful in repairing damaged DNA, okay? So we can actually influence and reprogram our genes by introducing new information to our DNA in the forms of words and frequencies, connect with higher intelligence, divine beings, and many other various ways, right? We don't have to decode and splice our DNA and stuff. And so what's important to note here then, that in the absence of any new information, any new experiences, our DNA is going to default to its existing programs, okay, and just our existing biological and also our quantum spiritual inheritance. And this other piece we're going to get into here a little bit because it's very important to know this. But our esoteric and spiritual teachers have known for ages that our body is programmable by language, words and thought, and even beyond. Okay, so this suggests that our quantum DNA, this 90%, is the progenitor of our biological DNA. And that's really important to know, because how are we interacting with things and what are we interacting with things? Because it's going to change your biological makeup, right? So it's important. So DNA then is the master synchronizer of the human body, not just the brain. The brain is a part of the whole function of things that has its own independent function in many ways, but the whole body, in my opinion, is a brain. But the DNA is responsible for our consciousness, okay? Not just our gene sets. So our current task then is to become more aware, more multidimensional, more out of our just limited 3D view. Now, to go into what's, accessible in the DNA, which I think is extremely important, is that, definitely the heredity of our parents, that biology piece. But here's another important piece. It's also accessed through the DNA is the unresolved experiences, if you want to say, or even, we can connect with the quantum records of our ancestors, okay? And that's really important to know, because also within our DNA makeup, there's a karmic imprint there, which is in the quantum aspect, the quantum records piece of it. There's also an astrological imprint within the DNA, okay, which is, again, the way the, at the time of our birth, what was the magnetic aspect of the solar, imprint that, sets our, if you want to say, astrological birth chart and what that all means, okay, because there is, information in there to work with as well, because it's part of us. And then, of course, the Akashic record of our lifetimes are accessible through there. And in fact, we can go into our DNA and access it through just, again, little awareness, aspects, little connection things going in there, and pull forward different attributes and abilities that we've had in what we call our past, and bring them, and embody them more in our, in our life. In fact, guess what? You can go to the future and do the same thing, right? That's a little crazy, but we can. And, maybe sometime we'll have a chance to do that together. But the DNA is going to have an overlay of a direction, for us. And one of the most important things is that the DNA has the sacredness and essence of the Creator. And this is one of the biggest ironies of creation, that here we are in 3D, and we carry all, such as magnificent quantumness, and we don't even realize and acknowledge that the Creator is imbued in us in our DNA. Right? So this multi-dimensional attributes of your DNA are not touchable in 3D. They're not touchable. Okay? And realize that, if you could be on Earth in your full divine form, we can't. We cannot be on Earth in our full divine form, right? So a lot of us stay, if you want to say, on the other side of the veil. And when you look at, the higher self is just simply you in a higher, vibrating condition and consciousness on the other side of the veil, which can be accessed through your DNA. Okay? So much of you, is on the other side of the veil, swimming in quantumness among multiple potentials. And it only becomes structured with our permission, our intent on this side of the veil, right? And this is what we call our physical reality, right? Our physical life. So when we look at being on a spiritual path of discovery and so forth, it'll be really important to start within our DNA, our heart, and this connection and things to bring it forward. So remember then that, a person that is working with and addressing and communes with, their own cells, their DNA, daily, they're enhancing their consciousness, okay, and the conscious awareness expansion. And it's helping them their health and well-being. So in your spiritual practices, realize the sacredness of you and the connection that all this is here and through you, right? Remember, someone famous said, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. That's what it means. It's right here. It's right here. And the last piece I want to share before I get, Marti's comments is to also enhance our consciousness. The restoration of our divine masculine and divine feminine is really important, very, very, important necessity. Now, this is not something that you could just go intellectually read, right? You are bringing, you're part of it, a participant of integrating and restoring this within divine masculine, divine feminine. And that, I'm not just talking masculine, feminine, I'm talking divine masculine, divine feminine, right? And this then, really increase the consciousness even more and connectivity to so much beyond just this, our view of this chemical-based, body. And that's, if anything else, what I want to share to understand this. All right, Marty, what would you like to say about that, if anything?
Oh, wow, is what I want to say. That was brilliant. There are, I think, about 3 things that really struck me. So here goes. First of all, this business of the sacred. If everybody with us tonight could imagine that they are sacred,
Yes.
just throw it to your imagination. Don't think, don't reason, just imagine, be. You will have a different experience of life. If you could imagine that every single challenge and joy, pain and joy that you have, it's all sacred. In other words, it's being spoken by a much larger force or voice, however you want to feel into that. That's a life changer right there. So bless you for that. A lot of things you said. Well, I grew up in a family of it was a brief but illustrious line of scientists. So I grew up with DNA and RNA and all that stuff, right? So I love this. It's really great. But so many times, as you were bringing your wisdom forward, I hope everybody heard how important awareness is. And it's not awareness coming from the ego. There's a much bigger awareness that is more powerful and accurate and intricate, that really does the work for us as human beings. It keeps us alive and it keeps us growing. And we have to learn how to use that awareness. And it goes down to the level of DNA. And when you were describing the DNA loops, there's a couple of things that came to me. One is when I was talking about that big flow of energy and information and how it creates these little whirlpools, just like a stream does. Those whirlpools, they're torus dynamics.
Yes.
And if you can Google this, we were joking about Googling, you can Google this and you'll find these animations of a torus, and it's the animated double helix looping in on itself. So you'll find diagrams of this, and this is how we're made, and it's at all scales. It is so important that is the speech of consciousness that we are literally made of, and you can train awareness to contact that directly, to listen and receive directly from that. But I think before I get to the big one, when you were talking about sonics, about voice, this is something for everybody on the planet now. When you're speaking with other people, would you please speak their names? The sound of our own name is healing. Angeles Arian is a great teacher. She used to talk about this all the time. The sound of another person's voice, when you speak another person's name, Robert, yeah, it just goes into your heart. Robert, I'd like to talk to you. Instead of, hey, can we have a meeting? Robert, let's get together. Try this with your friends and your family. Try this with your enemies. We are attuned to sonics, to waveforms, and when they're in the audible range, it does something to us. This is so important. This is why many cultures will say not being able to sing is like not being able to talk.
Yes.
Right? This is why one of the reasons that humans have the kind of voices that we have, why we've been given this mystery of language. Yeah, so we can keep one another healthy and connected through the sonics of our language and our intent and our feelings. So the other thing I want to be sure to get to is the last big one that you presented, the divine masculine and the divine feminine. We are not talking about gender. We are talking about forces of creation. And all indigenous cultures understand that these two forces, you can't separate them. They work together. You can try to ignore one of them and you have a mess on your hands like we do in the world today. You can try to put one down and we have a bigger mess like we do, but you cannot separate these universal forces. And there is a way in the Andean cultures that they describe this, and they say that the masculine, well, I'll do it the other way, the feminine principle, the way it's translated is quote-unquote in charge of love and wisdom. And the masculine principle is in charge of strength and intelligence. So then they say to us, imagine bringing strength to love and intelligence to wisdom. And if we feel into this a little further, we can feel, I hope you all can feel, that strength and intelligence are capacities of expression. And without strength, love does not get expressed, right? And without intelligence, that's simply the pathways in your brain. Without intelligence, wisdom does not get expressed. And so we have genderized this in modern culture, and we'll say women are beaten down because XYZ, or men are beaten down because XYZ. I encourage everybody to pick up on Robert's beautiful statement about the divine feminine, the divine masculine. These are principles that live at the level of celestial powers. That's why we use the word divine. And think about these things, love and wisdom, strength and intelligence, and embody that, be that. Wow, that's consciousness right there. Woo, love it.
Oh, I love it too. Thank you. This is wonderful. Thank you, Marty. It was great wisdom. I love the aspect of using someone's name first too. Wow. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Mm-hmm. All right, people. Now I kind of mentioned I was going to talk about unraveling consciousness a little bit. So, you know, unfortunately I got lots to share here, but we're going to try to, you know, go as quickly as possible, and you can always get this recording and connect with it again. But one of the things that is key, you know, when I say unravel consciousness, what you're trying to get to is freedom, right? And frequency is a key in noting what needs to be resolved. So very, you know, it's no question, our mind, you know, does not function very well at low frequency densities, you know, because then it definitely connects into programs, logic, ego, this Roman numeral time pulse matrix type of thing. So lower frequencies, the mind do not do well. It just creates more constructs of hardening the looping into another problem or symptom. Okay, so we got to realize that we can't solve problems from the level of mind that's in a lower density frequency base. It's just going to trip you up more and more. Okay, so the other thing that, you know, well, I just want to, you know, bring, like, you know, a lot of times we hear a lot of different buzzwords out there in the world. We're like emotional intelligence, right? Well, what I want you to understand is that emotions aren't intelligence. You're the intelligence, okay? Emotions are signatures, if you want to say. So you're using your awareness and intelligence to bring forward, you know, understanding of what's going on, right? So the emotions is a signature. You know, neuroscience says emotions are chemical recordings of your environment, of your experiences, right? So our emotions, you know, are records of our experience, if you want to say, right? So they're indicators of conscious being held that may be limiting you, okay? So we need to look at what's going on here. Now, what I always like to, you know, to help explain what I'm getting at here, I like to say, and just have you look at how we handle and attach to our current experiences. The best way for me to teach it is how we handle it, you know, attached to our current experiences. One of the biggest things that we tend to do a lot of times is condemn ourselves or someone else in an experience, okay? And then this can be done by judging, criticizing, or blaming, you know, an experience. And this can go three different ways, right? We can judge, criticize, or blame ourselves. We can get it from another, or we can be doing it to someone. Each one of those three makes 9 different directions. And to unravel it, we have to identify which direction it's coming from first. Okay, so a lot of times people say, why is hate being judged? Understood, right? However, to start moving it, you got to understand what is the leading way to resolve that judging or criticizing or blaming, right? A lot of times we want to think it's others, but we got to feel, we got to say, okay, yes, okay, let's say judging from others. You know, it's not the leading thing here we need to work with. I mean, it could be, you know, first judging self. It's like, wow, that's weaker first. I need to resolve that first. Or it may be judging others comes up as a weakness to follow, to work with. So you got to feel what direction to resolve first. Because once you resolve, let's say it's self, or you actually having some judgments upon someone, as little as it may be, okay, it could hook in consciousness to where it bothers you too much to get judgments from others, okay? Because I do believe we're very conscious and loving beings, and we can hook in these type of things, and each little thing can, really bother us. But to resolve them, we got to understand what direction it comes from first. Judging, criticizing, blaming, 3 directions: self, from, or to. Okay, so very important. The also thing that we do when we're handle, an experience is we can create a belief, a boundary, or a construct, right, of the experience, which can be a problem if we haven't allowed the experience just to pass through us, or we handle it properly, right, that we don't create a belief, a boundary, or a construct that supposedly makes the experience better. So this is where we get into the aspect of awareness and consciousness of what we're doing in this energy of ourselves, the consciousness of interactions. And a lot of times I think why we're not connecting so much with people, because we haven't resolved some things going on in our dynamics of experiencing with people. Yeah. But the other thing which, when we look at, how we handle experience attached with it, how do we label this experience? Are we saying, okay, it's good, bad, or, mediocre? We could, put that type of things, kind of an aspect of, judgment, criticizing, or blaming an experience, but this good, bad, or, So what we do with it again, right? The other thing that we tend to do, which, we give things names, right? And the best way for me to talk about consciousness and how, we trip ourselves up is to use, our medical or psychological naming, labeling of all kinds of different diseases and symptoms and everything else. We have like 20,000, right? Mm-hmm. But once you give, a name to something, it has a consciousness, right? And there's history out there of not just, what's going on with you and maybe people close to you. There becomes now a collective consciousness. So when you give something a name and you connect with it, now you're connecting in with potential frequencies of things. And you're flipping out potentially or going down a rabbit hole related to a labeling or name of something, which may or may not really pertain to you, other than the fact that you're connecting in with a consciousness you don't necessarily want to connect in with. So I want to share that from this aspect that just because things are being named and labeled, not to get caught into the resonance of the things. Keep yourself independent and work what's here with you versus go down that rabbit hole or look up a bunch of information and Google and find out all these things that could possibly come in, because you're just latching into different frequencies of this consciousness, these constructs that could actually, lessen your adventure where you really want to go, right? Mm-hmm. So also when we're looking at handling our experiences, we have to look at, are we comparing, right? Previous ones or our expectations, because that can all then wrap into making things worse, right? And wrapping things in. So when I look at these things with people, I got to unravel this stuff so they can be an experience without doing all the things that I've already said. And the thing to note then is how we then emote in them, the level of the intensity, the level of the reaction, the level of sensitivity, because those different levels, of course, makes a difference. But also in the identification of your experiences, when you're emoting or reacting so strongly, which almost seems irrational based on the outside experience you're having, you need to look at what's really going on, because not many times, what you do is if you're not aware, what you've been doing is you've been accumulating experiences of emotions and sensitivities and reactions that you're still latched to. So when you're having a normal experience, if you want to say, you're again, such heightened because there's so many accumulations of things that have gone unresolved. Yes. So this is a thing then to look at. For sure. In fact, just give you, a brief experience of just what's happened this week, and she may be on the call right now, but it's very pertinent what's going on related to the COVID, where someone's like has to wear a mask. Well, my client, she, has always had this whole problem of wearing the mask. It really, flips her out. Well, finally, her 11-year-old son had to put a mask on as he was going to be in like jiu-jitsu or karate or taekwondo, I think it was. Well, when that happened, she's broke down, crying, and was really, really upset. So when we had the opportunity to connect and talk about it, it was like, okay, so you can see that this is beyond just the current experience, right? So as we were then connecting in with it, it's like, all right, what's here? What's here? Because, what was here was, because I could see the imagery of the experiences that she was reacting to, and then the density of those experiences. And it went back to her ancestors, okay? And definitely people wear a mask, very ill, very impoverished, very sick, and it was heavy, okay? So with our conscious awareness, okay, as far as me as, working with different people, I could go there, I felt the density, I had to then start working through that density to the point where she started feeling better. So how do I know that I was the right path? Because she started feeling better. Now, did it resolve everything we was going at? No, but she's definitely less reactive, okay? Because if she's living with some of the ancestral things like that, well, there's other things, especially having been working it, okay? So when you get to your level of awareness and consciousness, my point of saying it may not just be what you're experiencing here and now that's the thing, right? If it's that irrational, you got to connect in and say, what's here? Not a why, not to bring logic to the experience and say, well, this person did that person did that, here's all the things, blah, 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 right? You got to connect and say, what's here, what's important for me to go to start resolving, okay? And as we know with our DNA, it can go to the quantum records of us, right? And our ancestors. So it's beyond logical reasoning. So if you're just going to try to logically reason through things, then, you're going to miss a big point of your full awareness of a multidimensional being, right? So I'm sharing it from this place so then you understand what's going on here. So how we identify then things is through frequency. And the right answer is like an aha moment where like, oh, I get it. And there's a freedom, right? So if you're telling yourself, when you're having, something going on in your life and you keep telling yourself, this is the way it is, that's what's doing it, my ex, my mom, my dad, blah, 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 but it doesn't resolve the symptom or situation, guess what? It's not the right answer. It's not the thing. You keep going there. You're wrapping and constructing more consciousness around this thing, and you're not getting to the real thing, right? So you can't reason that, right? Because you're going to create more constructs in this mind that can't figure it out. You got to connect and say, what's here? And you got to be willing to go there, okay? And I can do a lot of different things to assist you in understanding that, but, that's what we have to look at. Now, also then to help identify, listen to your words and feel if there's something that goes weak. Now, I'm not saying have an emotional reaction. I'm saying energetic weakness. Our words will tell us, okay? And even another, this is where we start getting in that awareness of our, our energy consciousness. So if someone says a word, it can be it. The other thing that to realize when we're identifying things is look at the opposites. Now, the best way for me to explain this is like money. Many times people come to me and say, my issue is money, but their energy does not go weak. If you really get at it, it's like, no, money's good for you. But if you look at the opposite, no money, the energy goes weak, and then we have to start resolving the histories related to no money, okay? And now you may logically think, well, gosh, everyone would have issues with no money. But maybe not, because when you are actually then in strict, good consciousness live feed with your sacredness consciousness, creative abilities, things to be created, everything just be fine, okay? So, but no matter what, you start resolving the issue with no money, whether it be, your experiences, your other quantum experience of your past, existences, your ancestors. When there's a situation related to no money, you're going to be more okay with it. You'll be in more of a creative connected flow. okay? And that's really important. That's the same thing with, you know, happy, not happy, right? We want to resolve the not happy, you know, reactions. So then when there's a non-happy time, quote unquote, that, hey, just, you know, I'm just having another experience right now, right? And that even goes with, you know, positive, not positive, right? Or positive, negative. If you have to bolster yourself to be overly positive with things, then that's what that's saying is there's some things that are negative or not positive needs to be resolved. And then you could just be, you know, loving, positive without the extra effort to have to be something, right? But to help resolve it, I'm just going to go here. I'm going to turn it back over to Marty, then, you know, questioning, because we're running out of some time here. To help resolve this is one of the greatest things to be is in a sacred connectedness, okay, and alignment to help resolve. Now, Marty mentioned torus fields, right? Torsion fields. And you have a central axis going through you that relates to many different aspects. In some training, it's called like the midline. And you can start changing, okay, in that sacred connection, these different things that you're weaker to, these things, by, you know, the energy upon that central axis or that midline of you to start resolving. That's one way, okay? But it's very important. The biggest thing is identifying them, right? And that's really, really important. So if you're rambling a lot, you're in your drama, you're in your story, that's not the resolution. I guarantee it, okay? So the big thing is not to ask why, bring reason, connect, what's here. All right, you know, Marty, what would you like to share with that? And then I want to open it up so people start raising your hand or put some chat questions in there, and we'll, you know, answer things.
Yeah, I love this, Robert. You and I work on the same challenges for people in slightly different ways, but these, what you're talking about, these are core challenges to Western consciousness. And one of the ways I would say what you're talking about is you're helping people understand the difference between their experience and their response to experience.
Right on.
I always think of emotions as the response to the experience. And Western people get that all mixed up. They think the response to is the experience. And then I loved when you were talking about naming, how we name things. When I used to do a lot of energy work, I used to do a lot of visionary craniosacral work. You could be working hands-on and assisting a person's energy, doing all those cool things that energy workers do. But if you named what you were feeling, you suddenly couldn't feel it anymore. And it's very important about the human brain. If we start thinking about, we are no longer aware of sensory data. And the problem when we start thinking about our response to an experience, we lose the experience and we're thinking, and that's what creates that great compression and entanglement that you're so beautifully describing. You know, through my lens, I would say people's awareness gets caught in that linear part of the brain where there's no out. Right. It's A or B. There's no way to resolve because it's not wired for resolution. Right? It's wired to get there, and there's no way to get there. So these are really important principles that you're bringing up. And again, for people, I would say this is just kind of recapping what Robert was talking about. When you get caught, you're kind of impaled and looping. You know, this is a problem. I can't figure it out. Usually, people are trying to name it or define it in order to control it. And then they bring. You talked about getting hooked into historical data. Then we dredge forward the historical data, and that gets packed onto it. The thing to think about, and this is something I've heard in the Andes from way up in the mountains from these incredible masters, they look at Western people and they say, are you looking for a definition or an experience? And I would say to everybody, for God's sake, be in your experience. But to do that, you have to feel, not your emotions. You have to use your sensory intelligence to connect to the world. Use your awareness to pick up sensory data. Then you're connected, and then you know.
Yes.
Yeah.
Love it. Love it.
Fantastic.
Absolutely. So everyone, I'm trying to put into the chat another opportunity to connect individually with Marty or myself. I'm not seeing that it's, coming up for whatever reason yet. But if not, we'll put it in the follow-up email to the recording. But come this Monday, I will, have another connection with people, work with whatever needs to be worked on with people, whatever needs to be spoken. And same with Marti coming up on the 7th. And, there's a link there to get into her aspect of things as well. So that'd be good. So everyone, and again, if it's not in the chat, then I will make sure it's on the follow-up email. Please, anyone, raise your hand, type, on Monday, it's going to be at, 7 Central. And if you can't be there at that time at 7 Central, then we will definitely record it. And if you're on the list, we will send it to you. So not a big deal. And I'm not sure why my chat is not, going here, but it is. And yes, we'll be on Zoom and we'll be able to chat and talk. Again, so anyone, hey, we got a couple of hands raised. So we'll go to Rebecca, allow her to talk. Hi, Rebecca. You might have to unmute yourself.
Hey. Am I unmuted?
You are. Hello there.
Hi, great presentation. I love what you guys were talking about. Fantastic.
Thank you.
My question is regarding the neutral point. I've heard a lot of people talk about being the observer conscious, being the neutral point, and also being of light, but integrating the dark. And I wanted to see if either one of you could speak to that as it regarding consciousness. And also, does that have anything with the polarity spinning of the Taurus, so kind of the masculine and the feminine energy, and finding that neutral midline?
Oh, all right. Here's how I would think about it. I think Robert has a unique view too. The neutral midline is part of a bigger system. And as Westerners, we tend to go to the one thing. What is the one thing? In order to understand your Taurus dynamics, you have to understand all the parts. And that central part, I don't know that it's neutral, but it's a place where the inflow turns to the outflow in the Taurus dynamics. And so that center moment, sometimes it's called a still point. I don't like any of the English language references to it. It's a total transformation point, and it is in the center. It's where you meet it's where the universe meets you, and you create, and then you meet the universe after that. And so I would encourage everybody to not look for it as a separate thing. Every system has a center. And if you're looking down on it, it looks like a map, it looks like a point. If you rotate that 90 degrees in space, you can see that it's an axis. For a Taurus dynamic, it's actually the whole of a donut, and the energies are looping around that. And this alignment that Robert has spoken of, essentially for a human being, our passion, the thing that you love in life, the thing that you're here to do, that is your quote-unquote alignment. And whatever that passion is, it sets the frequency of your Taurus dynamics. And that will bring you to a state of calmness inside you, but it also brings you to your highest creative state. So these things are simultaneous. That neutral point or the still point, the center, is simultaneous with the dynamics of the rest of the system. Robert, what do you think?
Well put. And to go with, some of the physical aspects of things, when we look at the midline, this is also, the spinal cord running up and down there, which is, right, a very integral part of the central nervous system, right? So when we, and of course, it affects all aspect of us, when we can actually then strengthen to something on our midline or our spinal cord, which is, again, everything related to our central nervous system, that can help us then to process what needs to be processed through there. And even some of that strengthening then too, you are also then strengthening to the deletion of some of the accumulated effects. Okay, now what I'm come to realizing too is that needs to be a sacred connection in making that happen a little bit more. So it's more than just moving that energy around. It really is then connecting, in that balance of the sacredness of the divine feminine, divine masculine, and working it from that consciousness of that dynamic, because you're going to hit many more capabilities other than, you know, just trying to energetically strengthen the physicality to what might be going on here. But the midline and, you know, spinal cord central nervous system will help in that dynamic. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, but also what you're saying, Robert, is that midline, it doesn't just connect the parts of the human, it connects us to the earth and to the heavens.
Right.
It roots us and connects us upward. It's both and, it's everything.
Yep.
So we're only strong when we're connected into the bigger system.
Right
and
on.
I think that you've really hit on something that what people call spirituality, we often see people kind of shoving that into a special corner. No, I don't think so. Our connection to what we would call the sacred, to the spirit world, is required for our full connection in life and in the universe. And we do that through that spinal alignment, that central alignment. Yeah.
Well put. Well put. Rebecca, we answer everything for you?
Yeah, I think so. I just wanted to, the observer point of view, is that something that separate? It seems like what you're saying is, if you're totally aligned with your energy, then you're kind of in that beautiful alignment with all there is. And like if you're living your life's best life, but being the observer, is that separate? Is that a separate topic? We've talked about, like Eckhart Tolle talks about, you know, you're the observer of your life. You're not going to get too hooked in.
Well,
here's my.
Go ahead, Marti.
Yeah, go ahead, Robert. Yeah. Well, okay. So through my lens, again, it's both and. It's not either or.
Mm-hmm.
When our awareness gets stuck onto our ego, we can't observe. Mm-hmm. If you get yourself free, if you learn to get your awareness off your ego, you learn to flow your awareness into the world and receive information, be informed by your world, you develop this so-called observer. The thing I don't like about the concept of the observer is it's too humanized. It's actually a level of consciousness. It's a level of your awareness that is aware of everything as you are being the unique person that you are. You don't want just one or the other. You need absolutely both. But I don't think we can be free in our personal identity until we have developed the observer, which connects us to the rest of the world.
Well put, Marti. That's brilliant. And you know, to add with that as well, when we look at the observer, there's no question that there is this alignment and centeredness. And when you're observing, you know, it's from that place. And you can't jump to the mind, okay, and then try to, you know, figure things out, because sometimes in our reaction of our experiences we do, right? And then therefore you're no longer the observer. I also like to look at the observer as the I and the me. I is observing me. So in that place, then you are observing and experiencing without attachment, right? And that's the other key. Mm-hmm. Well, sometimes that takes then your ability to handle your experiences, right? And not become, you know, enmeshed in your experiences. No. So that's, you know, their aspect. So great question, and hopefully we answered it.
Thank you. That's perfect.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Thanks, Rebecca.
Thank you. All right, so we'll go to Eloise and let her talk. She has her hand up. Hello, Eloise.
Hello. Hello.
What can we...
Enjoying it. I'm really enjoying it. Some great new perspectives, and I have realized that you know, awareness and perception, and I love how they've been explained, how they've been expanded on, and I realize that we, I know me personally, and a lot of us, we use our own filters. You know, we can say our perception, but what we're talking about coming from, I think, is our own filters, how we filter. You know, I'm looking at something, and what filters am I actually using? Because if it was actually perception, I would be coming from a different viewpoint.
Well said.
I would be seeing things differently, and I love the aspect of being outside. And Marti, what you were talking about with smelling things and feeling things, and really, you know, I have said in the past, not that long ago, that I can feel a connection to the earth, and with everything that's going on right now, what you said is it's a great way, it's a great practice to get away from, to help I don't want to say detract, no, not sure exactly the right word, but to help me connect more with the earth and get my mind, get everything off of the garbage that's going on.
Exactly.
I love that. I love that. And Robert, it's great to have reminders and reinforcements. I've been a student of Robert's for a little bit now, and I love it. I love it.
Great. Yeah, he's a good guy.
I love the different directions. I love the different directions to go in. And
yeah.
Self-neutrality is a concept that can so easily be set off to the side. It's so easy. The ego gets involved, and all of a sudden, everything is taken personally.
Yeah.
And it's not a fun ride, and it's not a necessary ride.
Exactly. Well said.
It's something that we need to not be doing. I need to not be doing it. And so it's some really great reminders and great new ways of looking at things, and I love it, and I'm grateful.
Beautiful. You're most welcome.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, thanks for being with us.
Oh, thank you. And I love one last thing. I love the aspect of saying a person's name. And something I want to share is when Robert does private sessions, every time I love hearing how he says my name.
Eloise, that's beautiful.
Wonderful.
That's beautiful.
And I appreciate that. And I have not been the best at remembering to say people's names, and it's a really wonderful reminder to do so.
Yes.
And I'm a massage therapist. I walk out, the first thing I'm supposed to do is introduce myself. So it's a wonderful reminder. And thank you both so much. Thank you both so much.
Thank you,
Eloise. That was wonderful.
Beautiful.
Thank you. All right. So, Marty, we have one question here, and then we'll wrap things up. So Karen, asked this, Marty, what do we do if your passion, your alignment gets sabotaged or has distractions that get you off track?
Oh.
Your passion, sabotage, distraction, get you off track.
Well, to answer it really well, I'd want to know a little bit about what force caused the sabotage. So let me say something in general. In Western culture, for a bunch of generations, we have not been raised in a way where we know that our inner talent, our inner genius is a good thing. We've been raised to sort of be something else. Many of you may have experiences of being young and wanting to do something, and your parents said, no, that's no good. Do this other thing. Like, good Lord. In indigenous cultures, they look for the genius in the child. They find it as soon as they can after a child is born, sometimes while the child is still coming through the womb, right? They want to know the genius, and that's grown because that's a gift to the collective, and no one would put it down or sabotage it. So in one way, I don't know if this really answers your question, but I know one problem we have in our culture is that we tend to disregard, we've been taught to disregard our incredible genius strength. We've been taught to disregard our talent for creating, our special genius. And the world may look like it's sabotaging you, but the work is, I think the work, maybe Robert, you agree, I think the work begins with work inside oneself.
Right on.
Teasing out, this unraveling Robert was talking about, teasing out the imprints from parents and family and culture in general, the imprints that say you're sabotaged. Tease those things out and find yourself, experience yourself anew. This is where indigenous people would begin. We begin work inside the self to find the full self and experience that alignment inside. Then the expression becomes natural. Otherwise, we tend to end up blaming the world and saying, I'm being knocked off alignment, this is happening to me. It's the kind of situation Robert was describing when he was describing unraveling to us. So I think the big first thing is, Robert and I can say to you absolutely that gift you have is fabulous, and the world needs it, and you got to find a way to put it out there, but it begins with the self. self-retrieval is what it's sometimes called. So you'd work with somebody like Robert or somebody like me to begin that.
Yes,
Robert, what would you add to that?
And, you know, I'm aware, you know, of the person here. There's no question that what's going on here is you cannot, you know, be in your mind or mentalism trying to figure this out.
Right.
Okay, so like Marty says, you know, we have to get back to the self, the connected inside, and then experience yourself anew, right? Because from the level that you feel like the distraction of being sabotaged, we're not going to figure it out. So you got to disconnect, because there's source disconnection going on here. So the only way to get back to the passion is to get back to your source alignment with self and all that is, and experience anew again. And then the heck with it, right? So let's just try some of that. So brilliant. Okay, so everyone, the next Social Chrysalis Roundtable, put it on your calendar, is going to be August 19th at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. It's on creative aging, embracing life with passion, purpose, and possibility, which is great. I need to attend because I'm doing one of those things of aging, right? And it's going to be the facilitators on conscious aging is going to be Walter Drew and Barbara Dorn Drew. And they're going to be exploring the power of spiritual practice to uplift and to transform your life and keep you fulfilled and thriving through the shifting territory of aging and, of course, the challenges related to the COVID pandemic. So we're very grateful for everyone to be here. And I wish I could put into the chat, a contribution if you wish to make to Social Chrysalis as far as being able to keep this roundtable going to help support the really the platform. So, again, in the email that we follow up, we'll send that to you because for whatever reason, I can't get my chat to work. But we're very grateful for you to be here. Marty, I'm so grateful for the time I was able to spend with you and
likewise, Robert.
Consciousness with everyone. And love you all very much. Appreciate it. Marty, any parting words you'd like to say?
I love everybody who's here. It's wonderful when people show up to talk about consciousness because this is a big topic and it's near and dear to all of us. This is a heart-opening thing, and everyone who's been with us, you're courageous and wonderful, and I want to thank you. And Robert, thank you so much. What a great time.
It was great. Thank you all. God bless, and we'll see you on August 19th for the next roundtable. All right. Bye-bye now.
Thanks, everybody.